What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Logical, Plausible, Probable. In this video, I'm going to address why the new atheists seem unwilling or perhaps too brainwashed to actually comprehend a basic argument on why they are dependent on our Darwinian worldview and undirected evolution being true to deny the existence of a creator. But before we get into this, make sure you like this video and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming videos, and make sure to click the little bell icon. Now, some of you may have watched my recent video on why Darwinism is part of the new atheist dogma and seen how I was attacked on this by Godless Engineer and a bunch of his little minions down in the comments section. It seems they just can't stop themselves from dropping insults, demanding proof, and spending time telling the world about how stupid I am. Unfortunately, Godless Engineer and his fans seem incapable of understanding the entire point, which is extremely ironic and entertaining given how they claim it means absolutely nothing to them in regards to why they don't believe. Now let's see if I can dumb things down for them, since they seem incapable of understanding it at a high level. So let's think about this for just a second. What do we hear from atheists about why they don't believe in a God? Now, one of the most common is the watchmaker argument, and a lot of you will already know about this, but the short version is if something contains technology or components of order and appears to be designed, then it having a designer can be inferred even if you didn't see its creation personally. Now, their response is usually two main points. First, since we're inside of the universe, we don't have the perspective to know if there's actually anything that is designed. Any appearance of design is purely subjective from their point of view. Of course, there's many gaping holes in this argument, and while I agree that a gerbil is incapable of being able to determine the difference between a rock and an outdoor speaker that looks like a rock, but has intricate technology inside of it, this position requires complete suspension of human intelligence and consciousness and awareness from the whole supposition. Which is rather interesting and I would say hypocritical, given that the same people making this argument insist that we can know 100% via the Darwinian worldview that life and extrapolates out to, therefore the universe is not designed and can have occurred only by chance. Now, even though they agree it happening is so improbable it borderlines miraculous, or as it is often called in the scientific papers, a frozen accident. But how is that not just a complete reciprocal of the design argument? Apparently, we're smart enough to know that something happened by chance, but we're not smart enough to know if it didn't. Doesn't that put you in the same position as someone who thinks the opposite? Except for the atheist, things that do appear designed have to be either categorically ignored or explained through elaborate just so stories. Beyond that, if all the things that we do consider designed all require natural elements and chemical processes, and we can determine if those processes are created by intelligence, and all forms of life are ultimately made out of the same materials, just utilized in a different way, how is the "we never saw it be created" actually a viable argument? If you go back far enough, there's always going to be something that everyone agrees was designed, but ultimately requires the inference that it was done by an intelligent agent. Just because we can't answer who did it doesn't mean we can't know there must have been someone who did do it. This leads to their standard second counterpoint, which is if there was a designer, who designed them, and who designed them, and who designed them, off into infinity. Now, on its surface, this can be a serious mental conundrum. But when you actually think about this, since according to the atheist, we don't have the capacity to even determine if something is designed, this is like asking if a screw could actually comprehend how the person and the machines and the processes which enable its creator to exist came into existence, rather than accept the logical, plausible, and probable conclusion they do exist. So unless you are going to take the position that we actually are as dumb as literal rocks, or as they like to argue in the puddle analogy, dumb as water, at some point you have to consider, why are we even having these arguments in the first place? And why are atheists so adamant we can't have any rational conclusions other than theirs? I'll stop here because this topic deserves its own video. But usually it ends with something like, since we don't know how God could exist without his designer, therefore, no first cause for our universe is required. Therefore, even if from our perspective something seems designed, nothing actually is designed. Obviously, this pretty much covers the fine-tuned universe arguments and creates a nice blanket to cover organic life and all it entails from serving as a potential evidence for God. Outside of this, most of the other arguments are purely, pretty personal. I don't like XYZ about insert XYZ religion. Humans have used religion to justify extreme violence. How could any God actually let bad things happen? If God does exist, why doesn't he make it obvious? Morality is subjective. There is no standard outside of what I decide it is. Objections like this go on, but if you actually take the time to analyze these arguments, you can quickly recognize that pretty much all of them are purely subjective. Ultimately, they boil down to this: if God exists, why do things I don't like happen? And why can't I just do whatever I want? As I listen to their videos and read these arguments, while they are often shrouded in flowery language and seemingly deep philosophical concepts, there seems to be one more component that they need. There can be no absolute truth unless it enables me to escape the need for an absolute truth, in this case God, in order to exist. If absolutes do exist, then the subjectivity of the argument becomes ad hoc. Now let's shift back to the arguments against God's existence and do a little thought experiment on their validity from a slightly different perspective. Let's say tomorrow there was a massive announcement from quantum physicists, astronomers, and cosmologists that after reviewing their collective discoveries, it was an unavoidable conclusion that the universe could not exist without the direction of an intelligent agent and external causation. Now, if you notice, this announcement said nothing about which God was the cause, only that they felt there was no other reasonable explanation. What do you think would be most people's response to this kind of announcement? Would some people keep insisting there was no God? More than likely. But would the watchmaker analogy suddenly become an extremely relevant point? Would all of the supposedly imagined evidence for an intelligent designer being required for all of the amazing things we see in nature immediately seem like a very reasonable conclusion? Would the mind-blowing improbability of the first life form occurring by chance chemical reactions become borderline laughable, and undirected chance formation of exquisitely complex life suddenly seem ridiculous? After all, direct action had been required for the very universe to take form. Since life is much more than rocks or balls of gas, if detail had been taken for those to form, why would the same attention, or perhaps more, not been given to those things which are that much more complex? But you could still easily claim there was nothing personal about this cosmic being because we just evolved by accident. Life was just a random byproduct of natural occurrences. So now let's modify the announcement and say it was biology, chemistry, and genetics experts who made a similar proclamation to the world. Based on research, the extraordinary chemistry requirements for even the simplest form of life to exist without direct intelligent agent causation surpasses all reasonable probability. Just because chemical reactions and natural laws enable life, probability against the undirected emergence of the simultaneous functions essential to the simplest possible first form of life are just too great to be considered plausible. This, coupled with the obvious information encoded in the genome, transcription, translation, and the controlled semantic and pragmatic expression, raise the level of improbability to such a high degree that we can no longer consider any theory which does not include a primary mover. The functions encoded in this information, the storage medium capacity, all result in the most astounding molecular machines which function based on their own biological computation capacities. While we all agree that life has the phenomenal ability to adapt to different environmental factors, this capacity requires an astounding similarity to machine learning capabilities of artificial intelligence. It has therefore become absurd to conclude this happened without an intelligent agent. Think about that. What if you had just heard that? Take a few minutes to actually consider and think about what this would do to the atheist worldview. Who would now be the obvious one searching for a God of the gaps explanation for our existence? Of course, in this case, the God would be chance, but the vast majority of people would suddenly be searching for which God is the correct one to believe in, which aspect of religion is just manufactured by humans, and which parts are real. But just as importantly, our perspective on existence would undergo a paradigm shift. If there really is a God who exists outside of our current perspective and perception of reality, if I really do have a soul, and if there is another level of existence beyond this life, then perhaps this current existence is nothing but the beginning for me. Perhaps what I currently perceive as unfair, horrible, and completely unreasonable are actually learning experiences. What if the reason things appear to be breaking down is because they were never intended to be the final outcome? All of these concepts deserve their own videos, so I'm going to wrap this one up here. But as you go through your day, at least attempt to think about these two completely different worldviews and the stark differences between them. Then ask yourself, when I actually take the time to view the world through a different prism, do I understand why the Darwinian worldview, that our very existence, whether it be the universe or life itself, being the result of undirected chance, is central to atheism? Hope you like this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe. If you want to get notified about new videos, make sure to click that little bell icon so you can get notified by YouTube. I'm out for this one. Keep asking yourself these kinds of questions and always consider if they are logical, plausible, and probable.